Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stefan Estermann. I am working at the Swiss Federal Department for Foreign Affairs, and I am responsible for thematic foreign policy issues, among them Arctic questions, so I am the very proud Swiss Arctic ambassador. Dear friends of the Arctic, there are some 1,400 glaciers in Switzerland. Among them, the largest glacier of continental Europe, the Aletsch. Since 2001, it is part of what is known as the Swiss Alps Jungfrau Aletsch UNESCO World Heritage Site. It offers one of the most striking views of my country. Three weeks ago, on 22nd of September 2019, there was a symbolic funeral. Some 200 people paid respect to the last remnants of, no, not the Aletsch, fortunately, but of a much smaller glacier, the Pizzol Glacier in eastern Switzerland. The ice of the Pizzol doesn't move anymore. That's when a glacier is declared dead. Since 2006, it lost 80% of its ice, with around 4 football fields remaining. The glacier is expected to have vanished completely by the end of the next decade. 1 month before, on 18th of August, Iceland commemorated the once huge Ökjökull glacier, located in western Iceland. Some 100 people participated in the ceremony, including Iceland's Prime Minister Katrín Jakobsdóttir. In 1890, the glacier ice covered 16 square kilometers. It has now disappeared altogether. During the ceremony, a plaque was installed with the inscription, "A letter to the future." It reads, "This monument is to acknowledge that we know what is happening and we know what needs to be done. Only you, in the future, will know if we did it." The two ceremonies, ladies and gentlemen, only a couple of weeks apart, are obviously linked. They illustrate the common challenges we face. Switzerland and the Arctic. We can be quite similar. Two typical views. Where are we? Any guess? On the left, well, you see part of Greenland. On your right, a very common view of Switzerland. But we can also be very, very different. And it's easier to tell. On your left, obviously, the Swiss ibex, iconic symbol of the Alps, and on your right, a walrus in Svalbard, Norway. The two are emblematic, and both face the common threat of dramatically changing habitats. Now, why does Switzerland have a polar policy? First of all, it's all about geography. The Alps cover about 60% of Swiss territory. Basically, everything that's below the fine line that crosses our country from west to east is alpine territory. The average elevation of my country is 1,350 meters above sea level, and there are 48 peaks in Switzerland that are higher than 4,000 meters above sea level. That's what scientists call the cryosphere, and it allows us to call ourselves the vertical Arctic nation. As the IPCC recently warned, high altitude and Arctic regions are disproportionately affected by climate change. Glaciers are disappearing in both Switzerland and Greenland. The cryosphere is under stress, with far-reaching consequences that can already be felt now. Second, it's because Switzerland has a long-standing, well-established tradition of Arctic research. Swiss geophysicist and Arctic explorer Alfred de Kervin named Greenland's second highest peak Mont Forel during the second Swiss expedition across Greenland back in 1912 already. Switzerland has an internationally recognized expertise in glaciology and climatology. For example, ETH Zurich is ranked the world's best university in earth and marine sciences this year in 2019. Third, it's because we share a common responsibility. We are committed to achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement. Swiss people are very much aware of the challenges posed by climate change. Recently, a national referendum was launched called the Glacier Initiative. It proposes to become carbon neutral by 2050. If adopted, the objectives of the Paris Agreement would be directly included in our national constitution. Fourth, it's because of our strong multilateral engagement. We are an Arctic Council observer state, and the Swiss city of Geneva is the global operational hub of the United Nations system, hosting inter alia the IPCC, the World Meteorological Organization, an important regional office of UNDP, and major global NGOs like WWF. What is the Swiss polar policy all about? As everything in Switzerland, our polar policy is bottom-up. It's driven by the scientific community. There is a need for a Swiss polar policy because more than 15 institutions are active in polar research in my country. For example, the Swiss Federal Department Institute of Forest, Snow and Landscape Research in Birmensdorf and Davos, the Swiss Committee on Polar and High Altitude Research in Bern, or the Swiss Polar Institute of EPFL in Lausanne. I would also like to mention the Center for Climate Change Research at the University of Bern, led by Professor Thomas Stocker, who was co-chair of an IPCC working group between 2008 and 2015, the report of which formed the scientific basis of the Paris Climate Agreement. I'm happy that many members of this community are here today in Reykjavik. Our polar policy, which is being elaborated right now, will reside on 6 pillars. First, our polar policy is meant to encourage research from Swiss institutions on Arctic and climate issues. Second, it wants to promote international scientific cooperation in these areas. Third, it engages with foundations and the private sector to benefit from their capabilities. Fourth, it wants to build and leverage on our status as an observer country to the Arctic Council. Fifth, it wants to promote innovation to combat climate change. And sixth, it wants to strengthen our solidarity with indigenous peoples, keeping in mind that the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples was signed in Geneva. I am, by the way, very proud that Olga Letikai and her daughter Alissa, 2 Chukchi traditional singers who are also Swiss nationals, will perform tonight at the Inuit Night. One example to illustrate our long-standing involvement in the Arctic research is Greenland. The Swiss camp, which you see here below on your right side, in Western Greenland was founded already almost 30 years ago by the Swiss Federal Institute of Forest, Snow and Landscape Research together with ETH Zurich. The summit station, which you see on the picture above, is the only high altitude, high latitude, inland year-round observation station in the Arctic. The so-called Swiss Tower was built 50 meters high in 2000. It got damaged during a severe storm and has been rebuilt since. Prime research focus is the investigation of the heat balance of the snow cover and observations of the radiation and temperature profiles of snow. You can see on the map also Montforel, the second highest mountain in Greenland with an elevation of 3,383 meters above sea level. It's part of what some people call Schweizerland Alps in Greenland. Let me say, at the end of my presentation, also some words about GLACE, the Greenland Arctic Circle navigation expedition planned by the Swiss Polar Institute SPI. After a major expedition in Antarctica in 2016 to 2017, this is the first ever complete circumnavigation of Greenland. It's a multi-million-dollar project to study climate change in the Arctic and a great example of international cooperation. There are 15 research projects that will be conducted by 44 international scientists. Researchers will study the cryosphere, atmosphere, ocean, as well as wildlife in very remote parts of the Arctic. We hope that this expedition will be able to take place next year in the true spirit of the Arctic Council, promoting scientific cooperation in the Arctic for the benefit of all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like now to show you a very short video produced by ETH Zurich about how drones can be used to do research on glaciers. That's the innovation part I mentioned of our Arctic strategy. The video will follow shortly, and I would like to thank you now also to our dear Icelandic host for your attention and this unique opportunity to introduce you to Swiss polar policy. Thank you very much.